Welcome. We have the co-founder and CEO of Archive, a Stripe-backed software company that automates community and digital marketing operations for brands, retailers, and e-commerce. He's a founder and operator who's done everything from building custom e-commerce platforms to deploying millions in ad spend. Please give a warm welcome to Paul Benigeri. Say what's up in the chat, everyone. That's right. I like that, Cody. Spoiler alert, Cody is also with us. We've got the co-founder and co-CEO at Kynship, an influencer marketing agency located in Orange County, California. He's worked with thousands of micro-influencers and household names such as LeBron James, Jason Aldean, and Mike Trout. Warm welcome for Cody Wittick. All right, let's go. Love it. So for the purpose of this chat today, I'm going to start with some high-level questions on the state of influencer marketing. And then we'll have some more tactical questions towards the middle, and then we'll have some time for audience questions towards the end. But yeah, I'd love to kick things off. You know, the current state of influencer marketing, right? Like in the last year or two, we've been hearing, influencer marketing's the channel. You got to do it. It's super easy, super undersaturated, but that's becoming less and less true based on many of the conversations that we've been having over the last 2 days. Would love to just hear your take on what is the state of influencer marketing now at the end of 2022 going into 2023, and what are the trends that you're most paying attention to around influencer marketing? Let's start with you, Paul.
Yeah, so the first thing I think everyone knows that there's been a huge shift of budgets because of Facebook ad challenges, right? And so everyone's looking for other channels, and a lot of people are excited about influencer and community. So there's a lot of people trying to do this stuff, and I think that's super exciting. The other really big shift that we've seen is, these new short form video algorithms that have completely changed the game. Initially, it was just TikTok, but now it's the same thing with Reels and Shorts. And so the big difference is that before you needed a big audience to get distribution, right? Like Instagram would show your content to your followers and a bunch of their followers. Now that's completely changed the equation, right? Where it's not about the audience that your brand or your company owns, or necessarily like the audience of your influencers. It's about the distribution you can unlock with these algorithms. And so I think that's just completely flipping things. You're seeing people with larger communities and people thinking about communities do much better, because if you can get a lot of these smaller people work with you, or find kind of different ways to work with these bigger people, you're going to get a real distribution advantage, right? If you think about a viral TikTok, it might not be from the biggest TikTok account. It might be from one of your customers, one of your smaller influencers. And so given that the algorithm is completely changing and favoring this more authentic, interesting, exciting content, I think that just completely resets the playing field.
Super interesting. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. We'll do more of that throughout this session. Cody, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, much of that I agree with. I would say the only little slice that I would add is it's much more of a focus on content versus distribution in terms of following and having even on an organic following basis. So I think people are, and rightfully so, people are much more focused on the content creation side of things through influencers and viewing them as professional creators of content primarily, much more than maybe 10 years ago, as they view them as a distribution channel and they're hawking over new audience access. But as far as the state of influencer marketing, I would say it's growing still mightily. So one of the things that I feel like I'm seeing and noticing is that brands are putting more resources towards it. There's still probably continued added resource that needs to be added as far as hiring actually against it. I still feel like influencer marketing is kind of viewed this as this sexy one-off channel that people look at, but they don't allocate the resources necessary to actually make it a viable channel as part of your marketing mix. So I'd say that's growing though, slowly, which is good.
Now, one thing that you said, it was kind of a different way of even thinking about influencer marketing that I haven't even really put much thought into, is actually stop thinking about influencer marketing as a distribution channel. Really, it's a way of creating content professionally. Is that really how you relate to it?
I think it's their number one value asset, is their content creation ability. especially what Paul was mentioning, these micro influencers, they've built their following on that alone, not their clout or because they are a professional athlete necessarily, or they run a reality TV show, but they built it by just kind of the Gary Vee, methodology of content, constantly posting content. And to Paul's point, like the potential for virality through TikTok today is because of the content first, not because you have thousands of followers, right? So yeah, I would say it's their number one asset that they have to offer to brands.
Yeah, Paul, is that similar to the way that you think about it, or do you have some nuance to that?
Content is definitely a big part of it for a lot of brands. I think a lot of people's paid social secret weapon is an influencer or creator driven content machine. And so that can be a really big, important part of a successful strategy. There is still a ton of value leveraging the distribution that influencers have. And to me, influencers could be, I could think of a celebrity, for example. And so there's amazing strategies that still work there. There's amazing strategies that work with people that have influence across podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I think that's also a very viable strategy. And there's also different strategies for working and scaling the smaller creators, which you can either leverage purely for content. In some cases, people work with creators or influencers and just transact just to get the content and don't even ask them to post. Sometimes it's a mix. Sometimes you really are counting on their distribution. So there's definitely a whole lot of things going on, right? And depending on your business, the type of products you have, the types of product you sell, your goals, and how you like to operate your business, you're going to have to find the right tactic for your brand. It's super nuanced.
Yeah, that was an interesting nugget. It's like a paid social secret weapon, where effectively you're leveraging the content created by these influencers in other channels in order to make those efforts more effective. So given that, I mean, I'm curious, and it sounds like you both have kind of different approaches to how you take on influencer marketing campaigns. But I'm curious, Cody, what does an effective influencer marketing campaign look like today for you? Like, what are the things that really matter to you whenever you're structuring these?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually agree with Paul in the ways that I think there is different tiers based on your revenue and how big of a brand you are. I don't think every brand in the world needs to be working with a macro. I think that's people waste and spend a lot of money because they think that's what they should be doing. So I think there's foundational pieces that are part of an influencer marketing program. I think there's levels that you make as you grow and build. I would say the foundations are seeding, get the product out there, but leveraging that content within paid social, assessing performance from there, getting them on their affiliate program, monthly UGC, having ambassadors on your website, and then working with like a macro, like a Tim Ferriss, like Paul mentioned on a podcast, or having that face of your brand, like on a year contract basis. But I think that's less than 1% of brands that can actually afford that, one, and two, it actually makes sense for them. So as far as like our agency, we're doing the foundations. We're like top of funnel doing seeding campaigns and stuff like that, and really just trying to build out that community for them. But there's so many layers to it, like Paul brought up previously, and I think it depends on where you're at as a brand. I just think a lot of people get lost in all the noise from influencer marketing and people waste a lot of money or get burned because they think this one influencer one time is going to bring in all this revenue. I just think there's levels to get to that point.
That makes a lot of sense. Paul, is that similar to the way that you think about it?
Yeah, I think Cody's got some good points. I think it's impossible to answer what is, an effective influencer marketing campaign look like. Because again, it's like, what does good paid advertising look like?
Yeah,
are we talking about billboards? Are we talking about a car company? Are we talking about a startup that's got no budget? And so maybe to look at two, I think, awesome examples. I think one amazing influencer, I would say campaign, but even like business is like, look at, Skims. It's a celebrity driven brand, and they crushed the incentives between Kim Kardashian and, the core group that helps run the business. And so I think that's like a very, very integrated, just business driven by that. I consider that, community marketing, influencer marketing, celebrity marketing. On the polar end of the spectrum, We work with some brands that are automating payouts to thousands of community members every month. These are tiny creators, and every time they post a story, they get like $5, $10, and they've grown like crazy, even despite some of these like harder times. And that's a completely different strategy, right? So to me, it's really impossible to say like what's effective. Again, it just depends on the brand, how you want to approach it. The one takeaway that is critical, and I think always has been and just evolves, is getting the incentives right. Whoever you work with, whether it's a celebrity, a bunch of small influencers, a medium influencer, you really have to nail the incentives to make that partnership work.
Tell me about that. Yeah. I think back in the day, I chatted with you maybe like a year or two ago, and it seemed like the ways that influencer marketing engagements were structured, there wasn't like a standard yet at that time. And so there was a lot more leeway. Okay, you could do like free gifts, and you could do different things to get creative. Do you think that now the incentives are, or at least the way that these engagements are structured, there's like the way that everybody does this, or do you still feel like
absolutely not? I mean, I know we have like a mixed audience, right? I'm sure we have some brands in the audience that sell maybe like really cool sweaters or hats. Okay, you can gift your $30 hat to an influencer, and they might be excited to post it if they are passionate about your community, what your brand means to them, your mission, or even the product, right? So that's potentially a great incentive. I'm sure there are people selling digital products or apps. Try to give away a free app to an influencer. How does gifting even possibly work? It's just not possible, right? So again, there's just completely different models for different types of businesses. In a past time, we actually tried gifting digital products to people, and man, that just does not work. It is painful. But again, there are many different ways to leverage community or influencer marketing for those types of businesses, but we can't just put everyone in the same bucket. And again, there's really no standard. And the companies that consistently do really, really well and push the boundaries with influencer marketing or community marketing are the ones that are not looking for those repeatable kind of like patterns or established way of doing things. They're the ones that are being actually creative from a campaign perspective, creative from an incentive perspective, right? There's so many different ways to push the boundary. And I think that's what's needed to, really, really, truly succeed here. There's still things that a lot of brands can do, but again, there is unfortunately no one size fits all.
Can you tell me like specifically, like maybe about a time where the incentives were aligned correct? Like what does that actually look like in practice? Like aligned incentives with these influencers?
Yeah. So if you're working with a really big influencer, for example, you to your brand, like 50K might be a lot of money. To them, it might be just another check, right? And so giving them equity or an upside as part of the business could be a really way to do that, right? I think another awesome example of a company, this is a really large company. They work with over 500,000 influencers. They sell healthcare products. And the reason why they've been able to grow such a large community, which seems like insane, like 500,000 influencers, like you can't even have that many records in Airtable or Google Sheets, right? It's crazy. So how do they do it? And the key is that they have 90% retention year over year with the influencers they work on. And why is that? Well, they did something really, really clever. And they were like, hey, for our affiliate program, right? Instead of letting people get 30% of the first sale and that's it, they get 30% of a lifetime, right? And so now, if you have a product that has pretty good like LTVs and repeat purchase, you now have an army of 500,000 influencers that are constantly on payroll, encouraged to, push your products in different ways. And, pushing your product might be a negative way of saying it, but promote your products in specific ways. When you think about the traditional affiliate model, if I've got 50,000 followers and I'm, trying to advertise my favorite protein powder, I'm going to do that for a month and drive 10, 20 sales. Next month, same company, I'll drive maybe half as many sales, and it goes down over time. But if I switch brands, I can get that spike again. So if you just do traditional affiliate marketing with your standard 30% or 20% fee or cut off your first purchase, the incentives are not good for the influencer long term. And so you're struggling, right? So I think that's like a good example where a company's been able to prove out and figure out. And you can see how much further they are ahead of the pack. Talk to any company, 90% influencer retention year over year is just insane. And it's purely an incentive thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I got, giving equity, giving lifetime percentage, like getting the incentives to not just be about a one-off campaign, but really buying into a larger vision.
And
Cody,
real quick,
yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Not to scare away some smaller brands too. If you're a smaller brand, a great way to incentivize people is being their friends or being nice to them or hooking them up, having them be part of your community, right? So if you've got 10 influencers and you just push them product and that's it, whatever. But if you're calling them, showing them you care, asking them feedback on the product, well, that's going to create this kind of like human connection incentive as well. So again, there's so many different ways to do this.
Cool. Yeah, that's super helpful. Cody.
I mean, yeah, I don't have too much to comment on. I think what Paul's getting at is like, it's influencer marketing is more human than every other marketing channel. You're not going into a Facebook dashboard. You're not going into your email campaigns on Klaviyo. Like, these are human to human relationships. So it needs to be treated as so. Like, it's not just like a throw them in a bucket and you forget about it. It needs to be, you constantly need to be iterating because they're human at the end of the day, because how you start that relationship is super important. How you massage and maintain and hold hands with that relationship is super important. And it's all based on your goals and what you're trying to do. I think what you hear a lot of time from brand owners is, and 99% of them say the same thing. They want a genuine community of consistent people talking about their brand to their audiences. They just go about it in a completely different way because they expect it not to be human, or they don't have to put in the effort on a human to human relationship side of things, or they don't have the resources to do it. So it's kind of, they're fractionally doing it and the influencers feel it. So
it sounds like, though, if we were to use that type of incentive, that's more of like a distribution play, right? Like when the incentives are aligned in that way, or do you feel like if you're still looking at it from the perspective of influencer marketing is actually a way of doing professional content creation, like are the incentives the same if it's not about distribution but more about the content creation itself?
I think that it can be the same. Again, I think it's their number one value asset. Not to say that they don't have other values or things that they contribute, right? I just think it's lower on the totem pole than I think most people think influencers, their number one thing is because they have a sexy number of followers. And I'm saying that's not the case. Not to say that it's not important or it's not on the list. I just think it's lower than what most people think. And people get caught up in follower count and what this audience is going to do. And it's just really hard to win when you're just focusing on that alone. Not to say, again, that it's not important. Because I think pay for post eventually does make sense, not on a one-off basis, but like with 500,000 followers, them posting, that's incredibly effective. You know what I mean? And they're incentivized to do so for sure. Like I'd be running that all day. So yeah.
It sounds like you're speaking to like the algorithmic changes that have happened where, maybe at one point it was just about they have the distribution, they have the audience, and so you're just paying to get in front of those folks. But now when that isn't necessarily, like to Paul's point, the way that people are consuming content via the social graph, it's the incentives have changed a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the incentive part is really important, right? Because if you've got a YouTuber with a million followers or views a month, and you're a brand that sells, again, like maybe protein powder, you can be like, hey, influencer, for every 100 protein powders, I'll give you 20%. And then the influencer can be like, what if I partner with someone or I start my own protein brand and I get, XYZ margin on that, right? And so I think that's like the trade-off, that the incentive you have to compete with. And I think that's important to recognize, right? Like that's why like flat fees by themselves can be hard to do, because it's like, hey, over a long term, like you're not competing necessarily with only another brand trying to pay them. You're competing with how else they could monetize their audience, right? And so if you're like, well, hey, okay, cool. So let me flip that on you. You think you can get 50% margins by doing your own brand, but I'm a really good operator. We have distribution, we have other partnerships. Let's do a combo SKU. You're going to get 50% of that combo SKU or 30% of that combo SKU. And then we get distribution. Boom, you maybe have like a little bit of more of a magic sweet spot combo where you can leverage them for that, right? So again, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Like a lot of these bigger creators are business people. They have teams helping them think through how to monetize their audience. And so understanding what goes on behind the scenes and how else they can, leverage their audience is important when you're factoring that in.
That's helpful to know. And I'm curious, does all of the stuff that we're talking about here, it seems like it has a little bit more of a consumer focus. Is there a world like in the B2B context, maybe like B2B SaaS, for example, do the same principles apply? Is there like a change in the way that people ought to be thinking about this in the context of B2B? Yeah, Paul, I'm curious if you have a take on that.
I think we're starting to see more like apps and B2B companies have influence strategies. Our number one marketing channel at Archive, we're a B2B company, is TikTok, is influencer on TikTok. So it works.
Wow.
We see a ton of companies doing amazing work, especially with fintech, mobile apps, leveraging influencers. A lot of times it's a combination strategy where you get the content, you get the distribution, you repurpose their ads, and etc. But I think that influencer totally makes a lot of sense for B2B. And again, like to me, someone that's got a podcast is an influencer, right? And so doing like podcast partnerships or newsletters, I think that's like also one way to look at this idea of influencer marketing, like leveraging people with an audience, with influence. And so just being super thoughtful and nuanced about it is the key to success.
Makes sense. Cody, anything to add on B2B?
I'd just be investing on YouTube if I was B2B. And you're not going to get like free posts out of gifting product like we already touched on. So
yeah,
you're going to have to think of a way to incentivize and introduce the brand besides like, here's a free trial on 7 days, because no one's going to respond to that email on a cold outreach basis. Or if you send a t-shirt and a coffee cup, it's going to go in the trash. So I just try to think creatively on how to introduce your product and put it into their hands. That represents your brand in some way, that provides value to them in terms of starting that relationship. But in terms of on a platform, I'd be looking at YouTube.
Can you tell me as a particular example maybe of like a B2B influencer marketing campaign maybe on YouTube that didn't involve a free gift of their application, but they actually like cleverly made it happen?
I just think YouTube is the number one platform where pay for posts makes sense on a cold outreach basis, just because those are like TV networks to the creators. They're not going to just throw up random content. They're going to, well, maybe with shorts, it's probably changing that a little bit. But in terms of like longer tail video, I think that's where B2B is searched a lot. So that's where you're just tapping into like on an SEO basis as well. But yeah.
Cool. No, that's helpful. B2B, look to, yeah, go ahead.
I think the other thing that's super important for B2B is just understanding your finance like really, really well. If you've got like XYZ payback periods, like free trials, right? You just cannot run a good influencer program if you don't have all that buttoned up, right? Because again, for like a lot of brands on the B2B side, you might be okay acquiring customers for $100, $200, $300, if you have like really good subscriptions and whatnot, right? So I think just, and this applies to every channel. I think it's a little bit easier with consumer to just think about like, hey, what your AOV is. But I think when you're driving like installs, free installs, that obviously becomes a little bit trickier. And if anyone kind of like ramping that up on the B2B side needs to be super careful with that. And then also just tracking the lifetime value of the influencer channel versus maybe your other paid or other channels, because we've seen that vary a ton, sometimes higher, sometimes lower.
Yeah, that actually brings me to the next question I was going to ask you, Paul. On that is, what are those? You mentioned AOV, you mentioned LTV, so that's average order value, lifetime value. Like, what are the most important metrics, or the ones that you pay a lot of attention to when you're running influencer marketing campaigns?
We don't necessarily run influencer campaigns for brands. We have like a software that powers that. So I can say what we do personally at Archive. I might not be as helpful as an answer. Maybe Cody would be a better person to answer that.
Sorry, I keep going on mute and then it takes it a little bit. I mean, a lot of our strategy and the way that we're servicing clients is just looking at a price per asset basis, because it is that paid campaigns. And then we're just looking at how much it reduces CPA within that account. So it's completely judged on sales, on content, price per asset, lowering that as much as possible, and then leveraging it within paid social. So those are the two metrics that we're looking at as far as like how influencer campaigns are judged on behalf of our clients. How much can it reduce CPA? And first, what's the price per asset that we're getting?
You're saying reduce CPA. You're literally just comparing like, one ad set to another with leveraging the.
I mean, just
or like, what does that look like?
Total, all like aggregate. Like, how is it?
Aggregate?
How are the campaigns reducing CPA compared to what previously before all the content was launched?
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you said price per asset basis, meaning the asset produced from the influencer.
Right.
And then, how much does that impact, the other campaigns? Got a little 1-2 punch going there. Yeah, Paul, I'm curious to know what you're doing internally around Archive.
I mean, we look at when we look at so first of all, how to choose who we want to work with. And I think this applies across all channels. And I think it also applies to like big or not. There's some metrics that, depending on the channel, are important. I think for TikTok, for example, we look at obviously engagement and comments, and we look at the rate of change of likes over time, and views over time versus their followers, right? Like Cody had some good comments around, hey, it's not all about the followers, but I do think that looking at engagement is still super, super relevant. And you can find some really, really good underpriced influencers that are just starting to ramp up their views, and just don't have like a ton of followers and other deals, but they're getting like way more views than someone with 10 times as many followers. So I think looking at engagement in different ways is super important. The other thing that's just generally important with influencer marketing is making sure there's a really good fit between who you're working with and your brand, right? Whether it's a celebrity or a smaller person, depending on your ideals, your brand, et cetera, there's just going to be, an important thing to look at relevance. So, one brand that uses Archive was telling me that it's a CPG company. They make drinks, and they were telling me that it was a healthy drink. So they're working with only healthy influencers, like all the fitness people, et cetera. And that worked okay. But when they started working with unhealthy but like food junkie influencers, that crushed for them. These people are creating recipes and random meals.
What?
Why? And the reason is, like, why do people watch people eating and making recipes? Because they care about the food. And so when you have like a beverage there, it just, people are like, what is that drink? What is that drink? What are you drinking? Because I care about your food and drink, right? So I think that's an example where just really, really nailing like the type of influencers that you're going to work with and why can really move the needle.
Yeah, it's a great transition to how do you find the right influencers to work with? How do you actually choose who are how do you, I guess, establish that influencer brand fit that you were talking about? Cody, do you have a way that you think about that?
Yeah, and I would just say this is the number one area, and it's like usually it's the first step. If you're going to do influence marketing, how do I find these people and how do I choose when I get there? And it's the thing that most people screw up. It's the thing that people misstep all the time. We have like an influencer scorecard. So we're looking at content creation ability, number one. We're looking at content frequency, how much, like what Paul was saying, like, are they growing their account consistently? Are their views going up? Are they posting frequently? Like their last post wasn't 2018 or even 6 months ago. So when you outreach to them, they're active on the platform. We're looking at quantitative analytics. So like engagement rate or fake followers, all these different things. We're looking at, all these different things that involve with just on a qualitative basis. So I use the example when I was at Kalo, we had the opportunity to work with Conor McGregor. Kalo is a marriage and family brand. They made silicone wedding rings. Well, at the time, Conor McGregor was single and dropping mother F-bombs on every video that he was on. So not exactly the fit for a marriage and family brand. It's an extreme example, but it goes to show you like, that's obviously a huge, huge macro, but not a fit for the brand. And you, the brand, are going to know that best compared to me or Paul on behalf of you. You're living and breathing the brand every single day. So those are kind of like qualitative things like, hey, would I be proud that they represent my brand, even from small to big and everything in between? So those are some of the areas that we're looking at as far as like on an ID scorecard. As far as like where to find them, my rule of thumb is like, unless you're working with 100+ influencers, I wouldn't pay for a lot of these tools. There's a lot of free tools such as like TikTok Creator Marketplace on TikTok. There's Instagram or Meta for creators, or I think that's what it's called, Instagram for creators now, that's been launched. There's there's Shopify collabs, which unfortunately has been kind of negative reviews since Shopify bought Dovetail. But again, those are free tools. Like if you're working with like 10, 20, you're just getting started, I wouldn't get lost in trying to pay all this money for an influencer CRM. That's just it's not doing anything for you. It's just a tool at the end of the day. It doesn't give you the how-tos. But as you advance and as you invest in the channel, that's where I think tools and platforms and CRMs make sense.
Well, are those influencers aggregated on those platforms in a way where, like, does it make sense to, I don't know, you find an influencer on YouTube, for example, and are you just trying to then find a way to direct DM that person and just do these one-off relationships, or are those folks like, oh, you know what, we only manage these sorts of things using X platform?
I think I understand what you're saying. Paul, maybe help me out if you're.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
Most
that was a poorly worded question.
Yeah, no, I think most of the influencers just want the deal. And so they're not going to be like, we want to go on this platform, that platform. A lot of time it actually goes off platform onto email. If you're in the UK, WhatsApp, text message, etc., or IGDMs. So
cold outreach is the name of the game, really, for when you're starting out and you're not doing 100+ influencers. It's like just reach out to the ones that make the most sense to.
Unless you have like on TikTok Creator Marketplace, it's more of like a hand raise model. So you're like inviting influencers to a campaign, they can accept or deny. So that's a little bit less. But even I think majority, you're going to have to do cold outreach just because most of these influencers don't need to do outreach themselves. So they're getting inbound all the time. And you're going to run into privacy restrictions on social unless you're using your email, which is, I would just say, go with what is you're going to have less restriction.
Got that. Yeah, Paul, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I think again, unfortunately, the answer depends. I think in order to find influencers, if you're looking at if you decide to work with smaller creators, a lot of smaller creators, the first thing I would do is like, do you have an audience? Do you have customers? Are any of those going to be like good fits? That could be an easy way to do it. You can send an email to your list. There's many different ways you can do to try to activate your current customers. If you're starting from scratch and you're looking to find influencers, depending on the channel, it's again going to be a little bit different, right? Again, some people might be looking at like LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, etc. Typically, like the easiest way to do it, just find your hashtags, see competitors that are posting about you, spend some time on those platforms, and over time, just by like clicking through, you'll see some good people. The interesting thing is it used to be quite easy to do cold outreach, especially on Instagram. It's harder on TikTok because there's like DM restrictions. It's way harder to get emails. So things have gotten a little bit complicated. And so that's where sometimes like these platforms can be helpful. A lot of the problem with platforms that it's like a self-selection problem. A lot of the people that opt into those platforms are going to be the worst kinds of influencers. So it's a little bit challenging there. I think, So it's not a fun.
Don't work with platforms like that. I would just say that strongly. To be honest. It's just a conflict of interest, right? Whether it's a gifting platform, like they're only part of it, they're part of the deal because they're required to like be part of the platform. If you get a product, you're going to have to post about it. Or it's just a roster model where there's motivation on behalf of the platform to put this set of influencers in front of you. It's not necessarily the best fit for your brand. It's just a financial motivation at the end of the day.
How do you think about, go ahead, Paul.
I would say, again, the incentives are super important, right? Like you got a Black Friday coming up, you got $5,000 to spend, $50,000 to spend, you need a bunch of content, then some of these platforms are going to really come in to save the day. But again, that's when you need to deploy a lot of cash quickly. It might not be the most efficient output, but again, like all these things are important factors to just have to look at.
when is it appropriate to, it sounds like a lot of the advice that we've been talking about kind of cover the like micro influencer, nano influencer, maybe like medium influencer kind of category of influencers. But like, how do you think about the difference between engaging like micro influencers versus mainstream celebrities, or Conor McGregor's or LeBron James? Like, how do you make a distinction between those? And I feel like, Cody, you've talked a lot about, well, it seems like the kind of more famous you get on that scale, the more important like distribution is part of that deal, versus just purely content creation. But yeah, I'm curious to know, like, when is it most appropriate to engage with each of those different categories of influencers?
I wouldn't even entertain a macro unless I'm 20 million top line revenue or more.
Okay.
That's just a straightforward answer.
Yeah, no, that's an easy heuristic.
I thought what you were saying earlier was like, how do you outreach to these influencers based on tier? Because like obviously the higher that you move up, the more that you're just getting involved in agent. Like you might as like you're wasting your time if you DM LeBron James. Like first of all, he had 12 people on his Instagram. It's not him. So I would just be working like an agent network at that point if you're interested in working with a macro. But even like, I mean, you start getting into 200,000 followers plus, you got agents that are in the DMs or in the emails, or like when you hit the contacts bio on their profile, it's going to be some agency, not necessarily their personal email. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I think that's
let's pretend like I asked the question about reaching out to them, because that's a great question.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, sure. I'm sure a lot of people actually want to know that. Yeah, Paul, what about you? How do you think about the distinction between the different types of influencers?
I think it's kind of like just different marketing strategies. Like, how do you think about advertising on a billboard or doing a Super Bowl ad? Like, if you're a small company, whether you have the budget or not, you probably just couldn't even get that Super Bowl ad, like unless you just like overbid like crazy and had a way to just, talk to the right person to present that. And so if you're serious about doing influencer with larger influencers or celebrities, then you're going to need to do some business development. And so the scrappy way is to cold DM or outreach a number of people and get your first one. And then a lot of them, if you treat them well, can help introduce you to friends, and you go to events and all that kind of stuff, and can ramp that up. You can have a business partner, for example, that is like super well connected, that, brings a lot of value, and can be like, hey, like, I've worked with a lot of these people. And so that could be like a good way to do it. There's no silver bullet. Like obviously you can't DM Kim Kardashian, Cardi B, or et cetera. I think working with agents can work out, but again, it's really hard to get the right incentives. Agents will get like 10% commission or whatever it is, trying to do like something quick. And I think in order to make a relationship with a celebrity really work, they need to be really invested in your brand. They need to be willing to like work with you on it and actually kind of like try to build this together, versus just like a kind of like one-off thing where you're maybe just using their name or likeness and things like that. So again, there's kind of like the scale, right? Like I think that, if you're starting with like no network or no experience, then just be reasonable, right? Like either find a co-founder or, a business partner that can help out there. A middle ground is to leverage your influencers to get more of those, right? So I think like once you've worked with one celebrity or one medium influencer, usually they'll know kind of like a lot of other people in the space. But a lot of brands that have succeeded with big podcast, like getting on Joe Rogan, getting on Tim Ferriss, like they've been hustling to get those deals. It's not hard. It's BD, calling them, nurturing them, having them try the product, getting intros. And that is just how to, make that work. Because again, like Cody said, you just can't go to these people through just a, cheap, easy way, because you're going to get a really, really bad deal.
That makes sense. Switching gears a little bit, in the last 9 minutes, we'll hit on some audience questions. What should companies not do when they're starting influencer marketing? Like, what are like the most common mistakes, or not most common, but like things that you see common time and time again, Yeah, what do most folks get wrong about influencer marketing, Paul?
Oh, there's a whole lot of things. I think again, it comes down to just not being thoughtful about your incentives and what you're trying to set up. Like, you can't just go out and say, I want to do influencer marketing. You need to have something more nuanced, more specific, a clear strategy. Hey, I want to drive installs using, paid TikTok influencers and then do Spark ads. And honestly, if you're not able to, think about these things yet, then, try to get some friends to help you to think through it a little bit more and form like a really good hypothesis and test it out. Right. It's just like, if you just go on Facebook ads and just like run an ad, like without knowing what you're doing, like it's just probably going to go wrong unless you get super, super lucky. So I think just, you got to be strategic and thoughtful. It's all in the execution. And if you're not measuring what you're doing, if you're not thoughtful about what you're doing, it's going to be, really easy to go wrong. So I think that's probably what I want to say here. Cause again, there's so many different ways you could do things wrong and people do wrong, but a lot of them, it comes down to not actually being thoughtful. If I was starting from scratch and I wanted to be good at influencer marketing, what I would do is I would look at like a few competitors or similar companies. I would cold email the people running those programs and be like, hey, I'm new to this. Would love to kind of like buy you lunch or drinks. Like, what are you doing? How's it working? I would love to learn from you. I'll trade learnings. Understand like 3 people's strategies, get like believable people, and then use that to kind of like draft your version 1 of your strategy. And then you're not flying completely blind and doing some of the, things that, I should be kind of like talking about answering this question, right? So just shortcut that. Cause again, a app that sells like a banking app could be doing things that would be completely useless for an e-com brand, but that would just crush for them. So again, there's no one size fits all, and you just have to get informed.
I'm gonna give you the one size fits all answer, just because.
Why not?
But I would say, honestly, the mistake to avoid would be to pay for posts on an initial basis, on a cold outreach basis. I would not do that. I think you could waste a lot of money because I just think it's really hard to win on a one-off basis over time. I think if you can seed your product to a vast number of influencers, again, this is D2C e-commerce, like you have a physical product. So I'm not necessarily talking to B2B people. I'm sorry. Hate to discriminate. But I would say that if I'm just starting out, I want to get product feedback. I want to get content. I want to get my product into their hands. And I want to work with people that are genuine fans of the product. And that doesn't happen if you're immediately asking for them to post, because you're just not going to know if they're posting because you pay them enough money or there's a contractual obligation or they truly did love the product. Again, like Paul's saying, like, does that sometimes work for people? Sure. Like there's still obviously people posting case studies that I find hard believing, but if it's working, sure. But just from like a generic to give you the one size fits all, or try to, that's what I would do. No, I'm not talking about if I have a sauna brand, because obviously you can't mass seed that product. So there's a bunch of nuance to this. There's obviously like a bunch of follow-up questions, but if I'm just starting out, that's what I'm doing.
I think the point behind that is to de-risk, right? Like, I mean, effectively, if you're paying for a post right off the bat, you've just like kind of left yourself completely exposed. Like you're at the kind of whim of that.
I think if you look at more broadly, like again, D2C has like pretty tight margins. It can be like challenging. So maybe that answer holds true there. But I think that, for a lot of B2B and like SaaS companies, even B2C SaaS companies, paying influencers can be an outstanding strategy. Like literally, it is our current, best channel at Archive or app. It works. We don't. Of course, it's important to pick the right people. We have them try our product and make sure they like it as part of it. But we're like, we want to pay you to, shill our stuff and talk about it. But like, you got to like it, as well. And that works really, really well. And again, in some cases, if you're an e-com company and you don't have like the same margins, it can be difficult. It can be saturated. There's some good arguments there. But again, I know that the audience is varied and diverse. We've got some D2C people. We've got some SaaS people. We've got some consumer apps. And so again, if you got a consumer app, like you're just going to have to pay people to do some of this stuff. And it might be a really good thing.
Paul, how do you actually calculate how much to pay these influencers?
Oh God.
Look,
Good luck on that one.
I think every brand has to figure that out for themselves. Like there's no calculator, and so the way to do it is to have a testing budget and negotiate as much as you can. Like try to negotiate. Have someone on your team try to get a good deal. Like just like anything, you're negotiating your suppliers, you're negotiating, et cetera, et cetera. So negotiate. Do it a couple of times, measure it, and then calculate your metrics and optimize based on that. I think another way to think about it is not just how do you decide how much to pay, but know that the first month you work with an influencer is going to be a paid test, and you can tell them, be like, hey, so like if we're paying you $500, we expect this. If we're paying you $200, we expect this. If you can drive these results, we'll put you on a 12-month contract, and let's go. If you can't get those results, it's all good. So I think if you're serious about influencer marketing, you will have to develop your own heuristics for how to measure influencers, and you can validate that on the back end, and then you can kind of like maybe predict things a little bit, but it's always hard. But that's how I would think about it. It's like, hey, you have to actually build your own calculator for your brand. Depends on your margins, depends on the type of product, your audience, the platform, and etc.
The weeds and just start going to work and see. I guess like what you can get. There's not really. It's kind of the black box.
That's like that is almost like asking like, hey, like what CPM should you get on Facebook? Like you don't really. First of all, you don't decide what CPM you're going to get on Facebook. And second of all, it just depends on your margin structure, your goals, if you're trying to grow like more heavily or not, like your conversion rate, right? So I think it's important to just help people understand that it's actually a little bit more of a complicated equation than like, hey, let's just like plug in a calculator, divide their followers by whatever magic number and spit out a price. Because that, again, just like depends on so many things.
Cody?
Yeah, I mean, I think factors to consider in pricing is just the tier of influencer you're talking to, what deliverables you're asking of them, what's the length of term, and then are you having usage rights, things like whitelisting, all these different things play into it. But good God, it's the wild, wild west. I mean, you have people with 20,000 followers, people with 150,000 followers charging the same exact rate for an IG story. I mean, it's just because they base their rates on what they got paid last time, and that becomes their new benchmark, right? So that's why you have just a chaotic industry, which can be very, very upsetting to people, especially when you're operating on a pay for post model. It can be very exhausting. But those are 4 things that I would look at in terms of like, how do I structure a contract and how do I pay them and what to pay them? But like just on like kind of a macro category tier, who you're talking to, deliverables, what you're asking of them. Do you have usage rights? Because that's going to ump the ante at least a little bit. And then what's the length of term? Is this like a one-off post or is this a 6-month, 12-month type of contract?
Yeah, tier of influencer, deliverable, length of term, and then the usage rights. Not to get too into the weeds, but on the point of usage rights, is that something where it's like, oh, you should always go for being able to use it anywhere? Or like, is there again, this is just sort of like whatever you can get.
I would say yes, 100. Like from a macro overarching, always. Yeah. You got to have the ability to repurpose this, even if it's not just like on Facebook ads, but if you have a macro, like at Kalo, we worked with Dale Earnhardt Jr. He was very influential in us getting into retail partnerships. He needed to be on end caps and lows. So we needed usage rights and like his name, image, and likeness for that sort of thing. So you have to have repurposability to some degree. Just depends on what costs and what you're willing to pay. Like on a micro basis, I would never do a contract with a micro influencer unless I have repurposability. Just because then you're putting all your eggs in the organic distribution basket. And I just want, if I'm the brand, I want more to play with. I have all these other channels that I can make money. I want the ability to use the content elsewhere where I can actually have a little bit more control than just the organic algorithm.
Paul, is that something you're also like, you kind of heavily make sure that that's part of your campaigns as well?
Not always. Again, it depends on the goals and the relationship. The majority of the time, it can be valuable to do it. Again, just having these like hard blanket rules is not always great, and it depends on what you want to be doing. So, for example, if you have a community of 50,000 influencers and you want them to create like a ton of like content for you and share it, maybe you don't need usage rights, because like, what are you going to do with 50,000 posts? So that's like a real example of a brand that's using our software to automate their community. They just like don't need usage rights for all their content. If you're just not running Facebook ads, don't have a team to do that, you've got a scrappy team, then maybe you can get better deals by not asking for usage rights. So I would say the majority of the time, brands are using the content and are in the case to request it, and a lot of time it just comes as part of it. But I think there's cases to not need it.
Let's we'll end it there. I think we could have gone for much longer. So much to unpack from this black box of influencer marketing. So I appreciate y'all helping us demystify this whole channel for us. Paul, let the people know what you got going on in your life and how they can get in touch. And I'd love to hear from you, Cody.
Yeah, our company Archive builds software to help automate all of your community marketing, including influencer marketing. So we talked a lot about requesting usage rights, contacting influencers. We built software to help automate all of that. So if you check out archive.com, you can install our app. Super easy to set up, takes 1 minute to install, and it'll automatically start detecting all the content you're tagged in, and then lets you request usage rights, do all kinds of things based on that. So we think that the future of community marketing is going to be heavily automated, and we're helping brands by providing them the tools to do that.
Very cool. And how can they get in touch, Paul?
Twitter at Benigeri, BENIGERI.
Awesome. Man, the archive.com is such a flex. I love it. What a mic drop right there. Congrats on that. Cody, let's hear from you, man.
Yeah, we're Kynship. We do influencer seeding campaigns and leverage that content on paid social. So we're reaching out to 500 micro influencers per campaign, all no strings attached, and leveraging the content that gets posted, and leveraging tools like Archive. Big fan of Archive. So if you guys have not heard of it or you're just hearing about it, go and download it. It's a great way to capture content, especially if you're going to do seeding campaigns. You need to be able to capture the content and know exactly what content is getting posted about you if you're going to be seeding out product. And then you can find me on Twitter at Cody_Wittick. Same spelling. I don't have like a number 1 in there or anything like that to spice it up. Just at Cody Wittick, and happy to be helpful or a resource for even if you're not interested in our agency, to help answer any questions that you might have on influencer.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. This was an incredible session. If you're doing anything influencer marketing related, even thinking about it, these are 2 people you want to check out their stuff, get in touch. Paul and Cody, this was a fantastic session once again. Really appreciate you.